What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Edgar Berlanga, 18 wins and 0 losses, taking on Steve Rolls, 21 wins and 1 loss. Steve Rolls' 1 loss is to Triple G, Gennadiy Golovkin. That was Golovkin's return fight after the 2 fights with Canelo Alvarez. Now, this fight is seen to be the big step-up fight, or a step-up fight for Edgar Berlanga, who kind of became a boxing sensation. I mean, this is his first headlining of a fight card, but he quickly grew in notoriety because not only were his first 16 fights wins via knockout, but these were 16 wins via first round knockout. So it became must-see TV. Like, he would be on a lot of ESPN undercards, and it would be you've got to check out this Edgar Berlanga kid. He's just knocking everybody out in the first round. So anybody who knows anything about boxing knows that usually when it seems too good to be true, it often is. And that's saying nothing about Edgar Berlanga's skill set or the likelihood that he's going to do great things going forward. It's just that you know that first round knockouts and that pattern is not a sustainable thing. It's not even something that you should be relying on or even really going for fight by fight. So when Edgar Berlanga in his 17th fight fought Demond Nicholson and Nicholson made it out of the first round, I looked at that as kind of a relief for Edgar Berlanga. Now you don't have all the pressure of, hey, you've got to knock this guy out in the first round. So he actually got some rounds under his belt, 8 rounds versus Demond Nicholson. And, you know, Edgar Berlanga is still only 24 years old. So they're bringing him up gradually, methodically, which is pretty much the way to go. Like, this is one of those rare cases where you've got a fighter who's really still developing. Now, he's had a very good amateur career, tons of amateur experience. So it's not like he just put on the gloves and started learning how to box. He knows how to box. But professionally speaking, he's still, you know, pretty young in his pro career. So this is one of those rare cases where the name started to blow up. He's got a bunch of like celebrity endorsements. He's from Brooklyn, New York. So he's got a lot of like Fat Joe, for instance, is like rocking with him. And like Snoop Dogg from Long Beach, that's where I'm living. Snoop Doggy Dogg is rocking with Edgar Berlanga. A lot of celebrities know about this kid because, you know, a lot of people around the ages of 30-something, 40-something, people remember Mike Tyson. So you've got this, you know, young kid out of Brooklyn knocking all these fighters out in the first round. You can't help but draw a parallel, even though their fight styles are actually very dissimilar. They're not really alike. But this is a situation where you've got a guy who's almost earning, you know, celebrity status. Like, think Ryan Garcia, but Ryan Garcia has actually fought a top 10, you know, former title challenger in Luke Campbell and stopped him in the later rounds. So, but Ryan Garcia, by the time he was like 21, 19, 20, 21, 22, was already more famous than a lot of more established and more accomplished boxers than himself. Edgar Berlanga has started off being a lot more popular and known than he is experienced or credentialed or even well-rounded and schooled. So then it becomes a question of, well, how do you then start bringing this kid up? Like, what type of level of opponent quality should you be going for? So Steve Rolls, I think, is actually a very healthy next step up. Now, I had said that in the 17th fight, Berlanga went the full 8 rounds. That should tell you something, that he wasn't even fighting 10 rounders yet. 8 rounds against Demond Nicholson. Well, his next fight after that was against Marcelo Coceres. This was on the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 undercard. Not only was it on the undercard, but, you know, there were other good fights on the undercard, like F.A. Ajagba versus Frank Sanchez and Robert Helenius versus Adam Kownacki 2. This Edgar Berlanga versus Coceres fight was actually on the prelims. So this wasn't even on the pay-per-view card. You got this one for free. And this was like the main event on those prelims. Edgar Berlanga wins the first 3 rounds. I have to say, he's got a very good jab. For being such a brutal power puncher with just special thudding power in his gloves, like dynamite in his gloves, he actually has a very good jab. So he's got like a powerful jab. It's not like a snappy jab. And they were actually commenting on that during the fight. Lennox Lewis and Andre Ward. It was one of those like Showtime meets ESPN, let's mix up the commentators cast. I kind of like them doing it like that. But they were all commenting on, him having a power jab, but him not varying the type of jab. Even though they did say that he had an up jab, but he doesn't change the speed of his jab. And he's not very fast-handed. So he wins the first couple rounds, but Coceres was a mover. He was moving around the ring. He had a very competitive fight, he being Coceres, against Billy Joe Saunders. So he had already fought fighters better than Edgar Berlanga and gave Saunders a run for his money. So Coceres is moving around the ring, and then in the middle rounds, he starts to win a couple of these rounds because now he's starting to counterpunch and he's starting to like move around and then set his feet and throw a combination. Started to really bust Berlanga up a bit. And it was kind of interesting. It's like, okay, like now he's really starting to get experience. Nicholson brought him the distance, but now Berlanga's starting to get hit. Let's see if he can make adjustments. Let's see how he reacts to getting hit cleanly. And then so by the 8th, 9th round, this was a 10-rounder, Coceres had won like maybe about 3 rounds, maybe 4 rounds or something like that. So it started to get kind of close where Berlanga no longer looked like he was in control. It also started to become very apparent that he doesn't move his head very well at all. He's pretty upright. Again, he wasn't cutting the ring off, so he was following Coceres around the ring, not cutting the ring off. He wasn't moving his head, so he was always there to get hit. But then he started to take heavier and heavier shots to where by the end of the 9th round, he got dropped for the first time of his career. It was kind of a delayed knockdown where he kind of started to lean forward and then fell back on his back, smacked his gloves together like he was frustrated at himself, and then got up and then got hit another couple times, had to hold on to even make it out of the 9th round. And then by the 10th round, Coceres' eye was swollen shut, so he didn't do too much more. And then Edgar Berlanga ended up getting awarded the unanimous decision. But this was a close and pretty competitive fight. Definitely the most experience that Berlanga had gained up to this point. So this is his first fight since that. And that fight took place in October of 2021. So here we are, 5 months later. He took a little break. So now he's taking on Steve Rolls. Again, 21-1 without one loss being to Triple G, where Triple G, Gennadiy Golovkin, didn't look great in that fight, but he did end up knocking him out in the 4th round. The first couple rounds were kind of competitive. Steve Rolls fought pretty aggressively against Triple G, counterpunch well too. Again, Triple G ended up catching up with him and then made short work of him after that point. So what do I expect between Edgar Berlanga and Steve Rolls? Steve Rolls is now 37 years old, so the later this fight goes, I actually expect Berlanga to start coming on stronger and stronger. I expect Berlanga to also win the first couple rounds. Again, when he's fresh, he's really popping that jab, and it's hell trying to get out of the way of it because he's really stepping into it, and he's got some pretty good coverage. Like he really extends that jab, but his head is just so damn upright, and I'm sure he's been working on that since this fight against Coceres. So Steve Rolls, I think, is going to catch him with some flush punches pretty early on in the fight. Now, of course, Steve Rolls wants to make sure that he makes it out of the 1st and 2nd round because that's where Berlanga is going to be his most dangerous. Berlanga, to his credit, did fight well. I mean, relatively, given his, again, inexperience. But when he got hurt and even when he got dropped, he kept his wits about him. He didn't seem too frazzled. He held on and clinched when he needed to clinch. He moved when he needed to move. Didn't move his head enough. But he still had his, wherewithal. And I think that should really be considered when you're starting to think about how he's going to fare in some of these gradual step-up fights. So I think that the first couple rounds are going to be interesting. I don't think that Berlanga's going to get Rolls out of there in the 1st round, so it's not going to go back to that old pattern. But I do think that in the middle and late rounds, after Steve Rolls starts to really make things competitive, I think that Berlanga is going to get back to the jab and start doing the things to win the rounds and also to open up opportunities to start landing some more of his power punches. Like, he's got very good instinct. Like, he'll throw a hard right hand, which is kind of his money punch, but he'll throw a right hand, and then if the right hand is slipped, he'll keep a glove high, and then he'll throw the right hand again without throwing any left in between the two right hands. Kind of interesting. He really mixes his combinations up. So I think that the first couple rounds, again, are going to be interesting. I think Steve Rolls is going to make a decent account of himself by like round 3 and 4. And then I expect Berlanga to reassert himself in the middle rounds. Again, he's going to go back to the jab to seize control, and I think he's going to end up stopping Steve Rolls in like the 7th or the 8th round. This fight is scheduled for 10 rounds. So even though Edgar Berlanga is headlining this card, this still isn't a 12-rounder. It's a 10-rounder. I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Rolls, as experienced as he is, goes the distance, even at 37 years old. But I actually think that Edgar Berlanga is going to get like a 7th or 8th round stoppage, knockout, TKO over Steve Rolls, and kind of get back on track to where some of the magic and some of the mystique that he had with his name building with all those first round knockouts, the way that that was kind of dashed after these last 2 fights against Nicholson and Coceres, I actually think that Edgar Berlanga is going to be back in that driver's seat with an impressive stoppage win. Late-ish stoppage. I mean, it would be middle round, 7th and 8th if it was a 12-rounder. But being that this is a 10-rounder, that's kind of the late rounds when you're talking 7 and 8. But I think that he's going to be back in the good graces with the boxing public, and people are going to start getting excited about him once again. Not that they've lacked excitement. I mean, he did have those, setbacks, winning setbacks, but setbacks nonetheless, relatively speaking. But I think that the enthusiasm is going to reignite with the stoppage win over Steve Rolls. But yeah, let me know what you think about Edgar Berlanga versus Steve Rolls in the comments. If Edgar Berlanga does take care of business against a 37-year-old veteran who, again, has only lost to one of the all-time greats, Triple G, how do you think they should bring Edgar Berlanga up beyond this point? He's at the 168 super middleweight division. I don't see him fighting any of the top 10 guys like in his next couple 2 or 3 fights. I don't think he's ready for John Ryder, for instance. He's just one of those solid guys. Maybe a Daniel Jacobs, even though Jacobs is on DAZN and Edgar Berlanga is on ESPN. Unfortunately for ESPN, they don't really have most of the talent at 168. Like if you think David Benavidez, he's with PBC. Caleb Plant, PBC. We don't know what's going to happen with the Billy Joe Saunders career, but he's also Matchroom DAZN. Anthony Durrell sounds like he's considering retirement, and he was really looking for a title fight. Plus he's on PBC, so I don't see that happening. It looks like Demetrius Andrade, also on DAZN, is going to make his 168-pound debut, probably against Zach Parker. So those 2 guys are going to be pretty occupied. So yeah, let me know how you think they should manage Edgar Berlanga, assuming he gets past Steve Rolls. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thank you very much for tuning in.